Hi everyone, Bear from Bear Reads Books. Welcome back to my channel. And today I'm here for a January reading review. Now, this is not something I've done in the past. I've usually just done individual book reviews or Friday reads or something like that. But I think a monthly update to let you know what I've finished or done in that month is a pretty useful thing. So it's something that I'd like to try out for 2021 and we'll see how we go. Because January was a good start. It's a good start to the year. I had 6 books finished in January, and that's just going to start ramping up as the BookTube prize continues throughout the year. So 6 books in January. So I'm just going to give a short plot summary, mini review for each one. Any of these that I really enjoyed, I'll do a full review later on in my channel. But for now, let's get on with it. January in review. So right after New Year's, I finished this. Social Creature by Tara Isabella Burton. It's been on my shelves for a while. I think it comes from 2017 or 2018. And it's a story that intrigued me. It was quite interesting. I'll read a little bit from the back for you, so if you've never heard of it before. It says, Louise is struggling to survive in New York, juggling a series of poorly paid jobs, renting a shabby flat, being catcalled by her creepy neighbour, and she dreams of being a writer. And then one day she meets Lavinia, who has everything: looks, money, clothes, friends, an amazing apartment. And then it continues on from there. Lavinia invites her out and they become best of friends. So they become attached to each other in a very unhealthy way. Lavinia is very carefree and wild and does all sorts of crazy things. And Louise is struggling just to put food on the table and is trying to work multiple jobs and is trying to keep her life together. And Lavinia is the exact opposite of that. It's an interesting read without saying it's a spectacular read. I really enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. I think I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads. It's easy enough to read. As the friendship gets more and more out of hand and Lavinia's behaviour becomes more and more erratic, Louise, the one that's the normal one, I suppose you would call it, tends to get wrapped up in Lavinia's antics, and you find Lavinia changing, her personality changing to match, Louise's personality changing to match Lavinia's. And then there's a break, some sort of massive event right in the middle of the book that changes the narrative quite considerably. And without giving away a spoiler, I really won't do that. And then for the second half-ish of the book, maybe a little less than a half, it becomes all about the descent of Louise into something that she didn't at all consider when she took on this friendship with Lavinia. From that perspective, it's quite good. I like the way the friendships play together, but all in all, I think it's the type of thing, toxic friendships and needy relationships and that sort of thing. It's the type of thing that's been done before. It's still quite a good read. Check it out on Goodreads. Check out some of the reviews. But I liked it, but I'm not sure it's going to be up there at all with my best ofs for 2021. So that's first. Social Creature by Tara Isabella Burton. Next on the list was a big change. So this was The Weekend by Charlotte Wood. Now there's a lot of full reviews on YouTube or on BookTube already about this book. It is an Australian book from a couple of years ago now. It won the Stella Prize in 2017, I do believe. No, the Stella Prize 2018, maybe 2019. I don't know. It won the Stella Prize is the important bit. So, and Charlotte Wood has written some wonderful things. And I think I have her earlier book on my shelf as well, ready to read later this year. And this was amazing. It's just about 4 women coming together at the house of a friend that's passed away. And they've each been tasked with tidying up this woman's affairs after her passing. So they're throwing away all of the stuff that forms part of this house that as a collective group of women they spend a lot of time in, a lot of their summers, a lot of their Christmases, and a lot of their best and worst memories are wrapped up in this woman's house. But it's really the playing off between themselves of each of these four very different female characters, who over the space of the period that they knew their friend who has passed away, that their lives have gone in very different directions, either through something that they've caused themselves or through no fault of their own, but their lives are now in very, very different directions. And they find their friendships without this woman, their friend who's passed away, they find their friendships fraying a little at the edges. And it's quite fascinating how this has been put together by Charlotte Wood. It really is an amazing book. If you've never read it, Charlotte Wood, The Weekend. The friendship that they're outlining is a lifelong one, and they keep skipping backwards and forwards to memories of events with the friendship group, and then to the present, so that we can see how their lives have changed. And this skipping backwards and forwards is done reasonably seamlessly. I mean, I think I've complained about other books before where this sort of time shifting is really not done effectively, and it's very confusing. But in Charlotte Wood's case, in The Weekend, it is absolutely seamless. You understand perfectly that this character is moving back so we can find out more about her past, and then we shift back to the present. So at no time do you feel like, I'm not sure what character we're talking about, I'm not sure what time period we're talking about. Charlotte Wood has written this so clearly that all of these time shifts and head shifts from character to character are perfectly done. And that's a very rare thing, I think, in literature these days, because I feel like so many times talking about books on this channel, I think, I didn't understand the characters, or I didn't understand the time shift, or I didn't understand what their motivations were. And I feel like I say that a lot on this channel. Not with this book. This is marvellous writing. At its very, very best, about relationships, about women, about mourning and death, and really just about the lives we lead and the paths that take us on. Really a marvellous read. I can't recommend it highly enough. And it came so early in 2021 that I'm thankful that I picked it up, because it's been on my shelves for so long. Charlotte Wood, The Weekend. One that I was really looking forward to was Colson Whitehead's Nickel Boys, the follow-up, unrelated, but the follow-up novel to his Underground Railroad, which was an amazing success 3 years ago. And I, like everyone else, thought Underground Railroad was one of the most amazing books I've ever read in my life, and I still feel like that with Underground Railroad. And when any time I hear it mentioned, I remember it so well and clearly, and I have great memories of reading it. I wish I could say the same about the Nickel Boys. It's good, but it's not great. Like, it's a much slimmer volume than Underground Railroad. It tells the story of a young man who has so much promise and all of his life laid out ahead of him, and he seemingly has a plan. He wants to work hard, he wants to study, he wants to get a job, he wants to be better, he wants to improve his life. And then something happens, and then he gets into a car that he shouldn't have gotten into. He's on his way to a college course, and he gets into a car for someone that just says he's going to give him a lift. He doesn't know this man. It turns out the man had stolen the car, and when the man's pulled over, the boy is implicated. And he ends up spending quite a few years in a boys' home, I can't remember the name of it now, a boys' home called the Nickel Academy. And the boys that live in the Nickel Academy are of course called the Nickel Boys. Look, it's a great premise, and it held so much promise in the beginning. I just think it was a very much a surface level book. It really didn't dig down too much. It was a reasonable tale told well, but I really needed to know more. It seemed to skip forward through time. It gave me a good picture of the bad stuff that happened at the Nickel Academy, so I knew why it had this horrible reputation and why all these boys were damaged beyond repair. I get that. But what I didn't get was the rest of their life in the Nickel Academy, because it was, yes, horrible, but yes, they would have survived just the day-to-day drudgery of life that is living in a home like this. And that's what I didn't get the picture of. I got a very clear picture of the horrible events, but not a very clear picture of just how they survived those horrible events. So those day-to-day tasks and thoughts and conversations and friendships. I didn't get a picture of that survival. I got a picture of the awful stuff that happened to them, but not a picture of what they did to get through that. And that's kind of the failing of the book, I think. But still, Colson Whitehead writes beautifully. There is nothing at all wrong with the writing in the Nickel Boys. It's solid as ever. I just thought the story could have been pulled along a little bit more. Colson Whitehead, the Nickel Boys. Also in January, another one that held a lot of hope and let me down a little bit was Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. Not the type of book I review on my channel at all, but I did read the first one. In fact, the first one I did as an audiobook, magnificently narrated as an audiobook by Will Wheaton. And so I decided to do the second one as audiobook as well, because it's also narrated by Will Wheaton. And I've since gone out and bought a physical copy for my wife, who is reading the physical copy, or has finished the physical copy. She had a better experience of it than I did, and I seemed to lose the magic a little bit. All the stuff, all the cultural references and the quirkiness that was so different in the first one is still there in the second one. And if you can it's almost like reading just an expanded Ready Player One. It continues on. It's a few months down the track from the end of Ready Player One. All the characters are the same, and even the villains are the same. So all of that stuff is still there. All of the cultural references, references to music and movies and TV shows, all that is still there. And that's kind of the thing that let me down. I was hoping for the concept to evolve just a little bit, but it really is a continuation of the first. And if that excites you, great, you're going to love it. But for me, I was hoping just for the concept that Ernest Cline had just wonderfully created in the first to start evolving and changing. I mean, don't get me wrong, in this there are some amazing passages and parts. I still think about this epic battle between the group of friends that featured in the first book. The epic battle between them and the 7 versions of Prince, the pop star Prince. And it's wonderful. That whole section is 50, 60 pages or so. That whole section is just amazing. It is so good. And the cultural references are great, but they are vast, probably double the amount of cultural references that you found in the first. So in the first you kind of had this scene followed by this scene followed by this scene. In this one it is a roller coaster of scenes and a roller coaster of cultural references. So much so that ones you don't understand you just end up sliding straight past without worrying about researching or finding out what the hell it refers to, because there's just so many. If you stopped and looked up every cultural reference that you thought you should know but didn't, I'd still be reading the book 3 or 4 weeks later, because it's just vastly more complicated and more filled with cultural references than the first one. So that was my issue with it. A lot of people have taken issue with the main character, whose name is Wade. The main character, Wade, who has turned into, in the second book, and probably for the first half of the second book, has turned into a complete and utter douchebag. And I apologise if that offends, but a complete and utter that word. And it does bother me. But then you think, if I was given billions and billions of dollars and a multinational company to run, would I be a different person? And I think I would have to become a different person if that happened to me. And Wade does become a different person. And I guess by the end, his friends are there to keep him in check and to bring him back onto the path that he set for himself in the first book. So I'm not too concerned about other people's concerns with the book, in that Wade turns into a bit of an idiot, a bit of a rich and arrogant idiot, because his friends do guide him and bring him back. So don't be concerned that he's going to be a complete idiot for the entire book, because he's not. But it does have its faults, and I think in the end I gave it 3 stars because of the amount of faults that were there. I think my wife had a better experience with it and probably rated it much higher, as a 4 or as a 5. And I'm not sure whether that's a failing of Will Wheaton's in the audio, or I don't know. But Will Wheaton has done a fantastic job doing the audio version of this. So that's it for the 4 physical books. Also on top of that, there was 2 audiobooks completed in January, one of which I've spoken about before, which is Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan, or here, I'm not sure. So Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan, which I have been thoroughly, utterly captivated by, and I'm still thinking about it every single day. We're now into the first week of February, and this book plagues my thought every day, in a good way. If you haven't listened to me describe it in another video, I'll describe it again. It tells the story of mostly 2 main characters, 2 boys living in Glasgow in Scotland, in a reasonably poor part of Glasgow, and at the time in the 1980s, Glasgow was a pretty dark and dingy and violent place to live. It certainly got cleaned up after that. And these boys, they've just finished up high school. This is their last summer together, and as of the end of summer, they'll all be going their own way. We've seen these types of stories before. We've seen lots of stories like this before. This is our last summer, the last hurrah before we go our own way. I feel like that, talking about Ready Player 2, I feel like that is almost every John Hughes film ever made. This is our last hurrah, let's go and have fun and have one last blowout and go along our way. But this is different. The relationship these boys have, I've never seen male relationships, especially in a place like Glasgow, where it's very masculine and very rough. I've never seen male relationships written like this before. They're close in a way that men are very rarely written about. I mean, they're all heterosexual men. They're all close in that they talk to each other about everything, and they're not afraid of touching each other, so hugging each other, kissing each other, out of fondness and out of friendship. They treat women with respect, even when they're drunk. This is a very, very different way of talking and writing about young men, and I love it. I absolutely love it, especially because we're talking about young men in the 80s. So I don't know if that makes it unbelievable, but I don't think so. I mean, I'd like to believe that, because I was a young man in the 80s too, I'd like to believe that there were young men in the 80s that were respectful and intelligent and could talk and have proper socially conscious discussions with each other. I think that's possible, but it's so rarely written about. And I think that's what Andrew O'Hagan has captured beautifully here. So the first half of the book describes this bunch of boys going to Manchester from Glasgow to attend a punk music festival, and just the adventures they get themselves into. So yes, there is lots of drinking, yes, there is drug taking, there's all sorts of adventure, but it's a light kind of adventure. It's not like a train spotting type of adventure where it's hallucinations and heroin addiction. It's not that. It is a light type of adventure compared to that. but it is a boy's own adventure nonetheless, but done beautifully, respectfully. And this is what I love about it. That's the first half of the book. The second half of the book misses out everything and transports these boys into their 40s, where the two main characters are going through their own stuff as middle-aged men. They're married, and one of the boys, the most outgoing and verbose of the entire group, has been diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And it's how these men now deal with this problem, deal with this illness, and also deal with each other and their changing bodies and thoughts and emotions as they deal with one of their friends passing away from cancer. It's so it goes from the frenetic boys' adventure in the first half to the second half, which is this, I wouldn't call it somber, because there's still so many things to laugh out loud in the second half, even while his friend is sick, that I wouldn't call it somber, but it is heart-wrenching, heart-breaking, and just and also at the same time uplifting. Right throughout the book, I was belly laughing at so many things, and as well, it was so touching that it was almost tear-inducing. So it is such a great book. I can't speak highly enough about it. It was an instant 5-star read. That is Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan. And last on the list for January was another audiobook, Sophie Laguna's Infinite Splendours. Now, Sophie Laguna is an Australian author. Her previous book was called The Choke, which was about a young girl growing up in a harsh environment with some pretty awful role models. And this is no different. It's almost those same couple of sentences transposed to a different bunch of people. It is about a young girl growing up in a this Infinite Splendours, about a young boy growing up in a harsh environment with horrible role models. Specifically, it's about a young man and his brother growing up with their mother, their single mother, because their father has passed away. And they do live a life of infinite splendours. Their mother puts every effort into making their lives happy and wonderful and fun. And they live out in the countryside and they have free rein to do just about anything they want to do. And one boy is very interested in sport, the other boy is very interested in art. And the mother's brother, the boy's uncle, comes to visit. They haven't seen him. He's new for the boys. He's never been around. And we never get the picture of why he hasn't been around. It's never really revealed to us. But there is some whispered conversations throughout the book where you're thinking, I would really have liked to be in on that conversation, but the author doesn't let you into that conversation between the mother and her brother. But the uncle arrives and it continues to be an infinite splendour of a life. There is no impending doom. The uncle is perfectly normal, seemingly, and their lives continue on and until the horrible thing happens, in that the uncle abuses one of the children. And then Matt disappears. He runs away. And then the rest of the book is this boy's life as he grows into manhood and what his thoughts and actions become, knowing that he was abused as a 10-year-old child. There is some level of description of the act that happens. So as a trigger warning, be ready for that if you read this book. But really the story becomes about the development of this man and how his entire life is shaped by this one event. And the image that Sophie Laguna paints for us with the life of this man is the struggle that he has gone through because of one single act of abuse, and the absolute ruin that his life becomes because of a single act of abuse. And that is supremely clear in the way that Sophie Laguna writes this story. It really is an amazing book, a really good story. It is very different. As much as I've made light of how you could transpose a couple of sentences from the choke into this. It is very, very different story, but it is confronting. So there's a warning there for anyone that decides to read it. But still, I can highly recommend it to you. That was my January. There's a lot of achievements there, I think. So there's 6 books completed in January. I've started in February my BookTube prize reading, so plenty to do there, as well as my regular reading still continuing. So hopefully this end of month or beginning of month monthly review works really well for you guys. I'm going to try and continue this one. I like this format. So wherever you may be, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. And I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.